Hola. And I think we are live. Let me make sure before we start digging into some questions. Yes, we are. Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody's having a great Sunday. We got an amazing day here in Boston. My name is Marian, and we have our guest, as always, every Sunday at 10 a.m., Tom Vargeletis with Leah Realty. And we'll get to a couple of questions. As you see, the topic of today is real estate and interstate relocations. And it's a live Q&A. You can feel free to ask Tom any questions that you can think of. And as always, we'll have a $25 gift card from Amazon for the most interesting question that we get during the live broadcast. So, Tom, if you don't mind to just introduce yourself and let us know who you are, what you do, for how long you've been doing it, of course, and basically what we do every Sunday.
Sure. So my name is Tom Vargeletis. I'm the Director of Career Development with Leah Realty Partners. It's a real estate firm based here in Massachusetts. And I've been in housing for the better part of a decade now. I've been a licensed real estate agent for about 4 years. And like Marian said, we're on here every Sunday to answer your questions live. But if you have questions after the broadcast or you're watching this after it's live, you can post your question in the comments below, and we'll still answer you afterwards. Or bring your question up next week.
Awesome. Super. So yeah, as Tom just mentioned, any questions, and the most interesting question actually gets a $25 gift card from Amazon. But for people that are not, live during the broadcast, will also be able to respond next week on the next broadcast. We'll just get all the questions ready and answers, of course, and then we'll get them on the show. So we'll get real quick on the first question for today. So the first question would be how to start planning for an interstate relocation in terms of of course, the real estate part of it.
Sure. So when you're planning a interstate relocation, there's a lot of things that you need to think about. First off, where are you going? So a lot of people are moving for your job, you're moving for school, you're moving for, maybe you just need a change of scenery. The most important thing is to first identify your destination. That's the most important. Now you could say, so we're in Massachusetts. Okay, I'm moving to Boston. And, a lot of people, if you're not familiar with Mass, like that's the only thing you're aware of in the state. It's like there's Boston and that's it. But there's actually there's a huge area in the greater Boston metro with a lot of great places to live, a lot of great towns. And then, there's the rest of the state, Central Mass, Western Mass. So you really want to identify your location. A lot of people are moving up here for work. If you're moving for work, it's a new job or just a transfer, you want to know where your office is going to be and think about like your commute time. How far do you want to live away from the office? And how much can you afford as well? So if you're purchasing a property, you want to get a pre-approval and then look at properties in your price range. A lot of people, especially from the Midwest, coming into Massachusetts, get kind of surprised at the real estate prices. Property, like if you're in biotech and you're moving up from Texas or something and you're moving into Cambridge, it's going to be like 4 or 5 times the cost for a condo that you're used to for a big single family house, right? So it's you need to think about what you can afford and where you're going. And those are the most important things when you're starting on your plans. And then when you have an idea of where you're going, how much can you afford if you're purchasing, or the same, likewise, if you're renting. A lot of interstate relocations, think about just renting for a year or two, getting to know the area. And when you're looking at apartments for rent, you get the same issue. Like if you're going into the city, rent's going to be really, really high for kind of a small place. If you're okay with driving a little bit, 20, 30, 45-minute commute, then you could afford a lot more house for your dollar. So when you're planning, like those are really the key things that you need to be aware of. Afterwards, you can come up with, you can find a moving company, you can find your real estate agent, you can actually start looking at properties, maybe even come up and preview some. But the first steps for interstate relocation is where are you going? Like specifically where is your office, and how close do you want to be to your office or your school, or whatever you choose.
Awesome, cool. So yeah, before we get to the next question here, if you think you want to add anything to, like, in terms of the tips, for example, when people are starting to plan, should they start with a list of things to do and then go from there? And then what would be, like, I mean, if we would put a tag like 1, 2, 3 most important things to plan for, and then start executing on those, could you like those 3 things to me?
Yeah. So again, number one is, where am I going? Once you know where you're going, number 2 is who can I contact there, right? Like, you get an idea, like, I need to be within a half an hour's drive of my office or whatever, or my school, or, I'm moving closer to family. I want to be within whatever commute of them. So then you got to think of who can I contact that actually knows that area, that will be able to help me find that house or that apartment.
Right.
So the second step would be to find like a real estate agent or a rental a property manager, someone who can help you find that next place to live. And then number 3 is actually executing the plans and making the move. So when you're finding the real estate agent, the first thing I always recommend is a personal connection. If you're moving here for work, you can call your HR department, you can call someone in your office or in your company who knows the area. Oftentimes your company has like a relocation department, or they have a program where they refer to realtors or to certain apartment complexes or whatever, and they can provide that information. So that's a great place to start for work. If it's for school, you can call the school that you're moving into. If you're not dorming and you're renting or whatever, like maybe you're coming to Massachusetts for a master's or a doctorate or something, there's a ton of universities for that all throughout the state. So you could call the school and say, hey, I don't know the area. Where's a great place to start? And usually they're very helpful and very forthcoming, and they've already built up relationships with like real estate agents or property managers or whatever, because they've been doing this for a long time. Next, if you're moving up to stay with or close to family, call up your family and say, hey, do you know any good real estate agents? Do you know any good property managers? Do you know any good places that I should really look for? The idea is to find someone who knows the market that you're going into, who will be able to help you find the best place. Because once you're in, you could try to get a short-term lease, and that's like the lowest level of commitment, but usually you're going to be living there for a while, So once you sign a lease or once you close on a sale, you're probably going to be there for a little while. So it's worth it to do some research at the beginning stages. And then once you know where you're going, you've got a lead on a property or on an apartment, whatever, then you can actually set a date and execute the move.
Makes sense. Awesome. All right, let's see if we got any questions before we get to question number 2. Let me just take a look real quick. All right, we'll see if we get some more people on the broadcast. While we're doing that, let me just get to question number 2. And that would be, should buyers and sellers be present at home inspections when traveling interstate? And I'm pretty sure, this can maybe relate even if it's not an interstate, but let's assume we talk about an interstate one now.
Mm-hmm. So should the buyer be present for a home inspection? Usually, I would strongly recommend the buyer be present if they can be, but sometimes it's just not possible. Even if the person is local and they're just working, they can't be there during, whatever availability the home inspector had. As a buyer's agent, I would always go. So is it like mandatory? Do I have to go or else it doesn't count? Or no, of course not. They're going to take your money. They're going to give you the report, whether you're there or not. So it's good to be there. It's good to be present if you can, because while you're walking through, the home inspector is going to point things out to you. You're going to be able to ask questions and get immediate feedback, right? Afterwards, he will write everything up onto a report, but it's better when you have that firsthand experience where you can really kind of, you can experience and you can see and understand what potential problem there is, or sometimes the inspector will write down in a report, okay, I see rotted fascia boards, they need to be replaced and painted. And if a buyer sees that on the report, they've never bought a house before, they don't understand, and say the house is wood sided or whatever, that's a normal wear and tear. Boards are going to rot out. It's pretty cheap and easy to just pull them down and put up new ones and paint.
Right.
But if you don't have that experience, then you're going to be like, oh my God, the house is rotting, it's a disaster, and you might want to back out. Whereas if you were standing there next to the inspector and then he saw the concern on your face, or you said like, oh man, is this serious? The inspector would then have the opportunity of being like, no, a couple $100, somebody will come and just do it for you. It's pretty easy to actually do that. And it happens all the time. So it gives you that like extra level of depth and understanding of the home inspection, being there and getting instant feedback. Home inspectors are always available for calls, emails, whatever after the fact to ask questions. So if you really can't be there, if you're from another state and you've got a home inspection and you just like, you're in California or something and you're like, I can't just fly back and forth, across the country for a couple hours. It's just not cost effective and it's a waste of time. So, if you can't be there, it'll be okay. Your realtor will be there. In some cases, I have not live streamed, which I afterwards thought I realized I should have done, but video recorded some things and then emailed the video to the buyer so they can kind of see it. But when you don't have that instant feedback, I think it's not quite as effective. But, again, if you can't be there, you can't be there.
Makes sense. Cool. All right. So we got a first question coming from Victor. As a buyer, what's the best, worst things to look for in a home inspection? And before we get into the answer, I want to say, Victor, thanks for taking the time to post the question here. And Tom, if you don't mind to
sure.
Let us know.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Victor. So what are the best, worst things? I'm going to assume by that you mean what are the biggest possible problems that could come up during a home inspection that you want to look for? So that question is really best answered by a home inspector, a licensed home inspector, because I'm not that. I'm a real estate agent, but I've been on hundreds of home inspections, and what I've seen inspectors point out as huge problems are things like insect damage in supporting beams in the house. Like a lot of these are structural. Sometimes you'll go into an old basement and you'll see that the wooden beams are being crushed on a what are they called, on a support post, a lolly column. That's a bad sign. Like if you see dry rot, anything in the foundation where it seems to be coming apart are huge issues, because if your foundation comes apart, your house is going to sag unevenly, because inspectors will talk a lot about settling, and they'll say that settling is normal over time, where the house just slowly kind of sinks into the ground by its own weight. It's not going to sink into the ground and bury itself, but it'll come down fractions of an inch over 100 years. And if it happens unevenly, what you'll see, and the inspectors also check for this in the house, they'll open and close doors and they'll look at the door frame, because when the house is sagging and tilting, the door frames kind of twist and then the doors rub. So that's a good indicator of that. Or sometimes the door gets stuck and you can't open it or you can't shut it all the way in extreme cases. And something like that is extremely expensive to fix. As the walls sag unevenly, think of like a box that's getting twisted or pulled and moved around like that. It will break your windows or make your windows inoperable. The doors can be a problem. It can break break pipes, crack the walls. Like that's a serious issue with the foundation. And that's one of the most important things that they look for. So you'll see in a home inspector spend a huge amount of time in the basement and outside around looking at the outside of the house. Next super important problem is issue for the home inspectors look for is on the roof. So they want to make sure that the roof is in good condition and that it's not leaking. Because if you have water leaking into the attic or into the walls, the water is going to, build up a lot of moisture. It's going to grow mold. It's going to attract insects. It's going to rot out the wood, which is, again, another huge expense. It's much cheaper to just replace the roof or shingle the roof than it is to tear the roof apart, dig out all this rotted wood and insect. And, so the bottom of the house and the top of the house are really important because you got moisture coming down and then you've got the whole foundation holding it up. And those are the biggest ticket items to look for. And then after that, home inspectors will look at like the condition of the windows. They'll see if they can get an idea of the insulation. Not many people do, but I've seen some inspectors have like a heat gun, like an infrared gun that can tell you if the insulation is evenly spaced or if there's gaps like above or under windows and things like that. They'll just check general efficiency and general maintenance issues, but by far the most expensive ones are going to be water damage coming in from the top or the foundation or structural issues in the basement.
Awesome. Victor, let us know if that answered your question, and we'll be happy to go deep into it if you think you need more details. But before that, let's get to question number 3. Who's the first person you should talk to when planning to purchase coming from another state?
Could you say that one more time? What's the first?
Who's the first person you should talk to when planning to purchase from another state coming to Boston?
Yeah, so we kind of touched on this earlier. The first person you want to talk to when you're planning an interstate move is going to be someone in your destination area. So if it's for work, it's going to be like your HR department or your relocation department. If it's for school, you're going to want to call your advisor at least first, or someone there who works on housing issues. If it's for family, just call your family. And if you have no one and you're just moving for no reason, then it's going to be a little bit more difficult on the front end, but you do want to make that connection with someone who knows the area that you're moving into. So if you have no idea about anything, you're like, I just want to move into Boston. You can get online, and it's really easy to find real estate agents. They want you to find them. Their phone numbers, their email, their cell phone numbers are on there for you to call, and 90% of them will pick up like right away. There's always that small portion of them that you can just never really get in touch with, but that's okay. You can look these people up. You can look at reviews online. They're realtors' customers that if they had a great experience or a bad experience, they'll post a review online on Yelp, on their own real estate websites. You can get an idea of, who would be best to work with. And then you can just give them a call and tell them your situation. Not every single realtor is going to be very interested or excited about working with a interstate relocation or an international relocation because it's going to be a lot more work for about the same amount of money that they would if they just called their cousin and said, hey, let me sell your house, or whatever they do. So it might be a little bit more difficult if you don't have a personal connection, but you can reach out to these people. You can call them, email them, and you'll find someone who'll be ready and willing to help you.
Awesome, super. And we got the answer from Victor. He said absolutely. Thank you again, Victor. If you stay until the end, you'll find out if you get a $25 gift card from Amazon. And again, thanks for taking the time to post the question in here. So the question number 4, unfortunately, we're not going to have enough room to post it completely on the screen, but I'll make sure. Yeah, I'll put 2 parts of it. So question number 4 is, how soon I'll find out about the things that are wrong with the home, and from who if I'm not physically there. And this relates, of course, to an interstate relo when when maybe the realtor is taking care of the paperwork and other things like that. Mm-hmm. And if the person basically is wondering when and how soon they'll find out about the things that are wrong with the new home, for example, if they make an offer, and from who if they're not physically there.
Hey, sorry, I had a bad connection for a couple seconds and I lost the second part of this question.
Yeah, so basically it was how soon I'll find out about the things that are wrong with the home, and mm-hmm. from who if I'm not physically there. So if we're talking about an interstate relocation, if the person cannot get there, how soon they'll find out about the things that are wrong with the home, and from who? Is that from the realtor? Is that from the home inspector? Who's going to let the buyer know?
Sure. So the buyer, no matter where you are, should get a written report from the home inspector within, a couple days to a week. Usually not more than that, and it depends on the level of the inspections being taken. Are they adding mold? Are you adding lead? Are you adding whatever? So just a plain old home inspection. Usually the turnaround time is like 24 to 48 hours. Sometimes longer if you're going to include radon and those other things. So what you should expect is to see something in writing only a few days after the completion of the home inspection. And that's coming from the home inspector. Something that I like to do when I'm with a buyer at a home inspection or the buyer can't be present is I will take notes during the inspection. Whether the buyer is there or not, I always take notes of my thoughts on the issue, and then we kind of compare notes afterwards, and I talk to the buyer. So if the buyer was not present, like you're out of state, I would call you up immediately. Hey, the home inspection is done. We found these issues. They might be potential problems, or hey, everything looks great. We're going to get it in writing in a couple of days, and you'll see. So it's going to depend. The conversation will depend on the actual inspection and what happened. But I try to give instantaneous feedback. I think most real estate agents will do the same thing. Just call them up right after if the buyer wasn't present. And then a couple of days later, you'll get the full report in writing from the inspector.
So that's what I wanted to just ask. Is the inspector is going to send you the report no matter if you're there physically or not? Yeah,
normally they email it. There are some home inspectors who will still provide written reports, and sometimes they will fill out the report as they're doing the inspection, and then when they're done, they will just hand you a stack of carbon copies for the report. So sometimes it's instantaneous. Not many are doing it that way because that's like the really old school way of doing the report. Inspectors are now using they have their little templated documents that they fill out online and then email them. But sometimes it can be instant. It's kind of rare now, but.
Got it. All right, cool. So let's get to question number 5. What to look for when trying to purchase a home when coming from a different state to Mass. And this refers to, if you're trying to get a deal, if you're trying to get a nice place and in a good area at a good price, right, in the same time. So what to look for, how, if you want to dig deep into the question.
Sure. So if you're coming from a massive city like in New York or on the West Coast, property values aren't going to really shock you. So when it comes to finding a good deal on price, it's not going to be that hard for you in your mind. But if you're coming from like the Midwest, or you're coming from a place where real estate is just priced much, much lower, you're going to have a really hard time finding a good deal, at least what you feel like is a good deal. And I've dealt with this in a few cases, and I've heard this with other people where oh my God, I'm used to getting a 4-bedroom house with 3 acres of land for, $250,000. And here, if you want the same thing, it's going to be $700,000, right? So you got to remember when you're looking, if you're from out of state, you got to remember that when you're looking to buy real estate, you're comparison shopping. A market value of a property is simply the highest amount of money that a buyer will pay. And in this market, it's going to be higher than in other markets because of the population and because of, there's other market conditions that play into it. But finding a good deal is going to mean, like, this house that I'm looking at, on the one hand, is, $200 per square foot. And if I can get this other house for $170 per square foot, which is pretty similar, then I'm getting a huge discount on price. So you got to think of things relatively like that. If you're from a place where, like that example I just gave, I'm used to buying this house for like half. You're not going to find that house at that price that you're used to, but you could find something similar for, a lower price, and you can work out a deal. But it's just important to get over the price shock when you're moving into the market for that first time. And then afterwards, it's in this kind of a market, it's really hard to get a discount on price, because if we're talking about getting a good deal, we mean like saving money, getting a lot more house for your dollar than anywhere else. That's going to be really difficult in the spring and summertime because, it's a seller's market right now. So you could time your home search to catch the market at a low point. Like during the winter time, there's not many listings on the market, but usually you'll see prices kind of come down. There's a bump in the fall time, but then in the dead of the winter, you'll be able to get a deal because there's just no buyers out looking at property. You could get a rental and just ride the wave until you feel like it's hitting a low point. That can get really dangerous because it's like investing in stocks. Like if there's a company that you think has hit its high point and you sell out, but it actually keeps on going, and you're like, oh, it'll come back down, and it never does, right? You just lost out on an amazing opportunity. So, and you can never predict that. I mean, maybe it will come back down, but because the future is uncertain and you need a place to live, it's better to act now than just hope that maybe things come back down. I had a buyer who's a couple of years ago, he was trying to buy in Cambridge. I mentioned Cambridge before. Super hot market. Real estate's been increasing in value. Like year over year, month over month. It's going crazy. And a couple of years ago, this guy was able to buy, like an entry-level house. Like, needed work. It was small, not an ideal location, but he could afford it. And he's like, no, you know what? The market's way too high. I'm just not. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait it out a couple of years. A couple of years later, he can't even buy a house in his hometown, Cambridge. He's looking way out west, like 30 miles out west into the middle of the state, because he can't afford, he's got a big family. He just can't afford to buy what he needs anymore, and he was certain. He's like, no, I'm going to wait. And, it's got to come back down. And it never did.
It never did, yeah.
And if it does, it could depreciate by a huge margin, and he still wouldn't be able to afford it. It's gone up that much. So, when you're looking for a deal, if you can find a decent deal now, and when I say a decent deal, I mean a fair price for a property. Very rarely you'll get like one of those steals. The conditions have to be perfect. I've worked on a few of those deals before, and it's really difficult to, because it's a lot of pressure on both sides. And oftentimes the seller is not too happy if they realize they're selling the property for less than what it's actually worth when they know someone else could pay more. So really the best kind of deal is you being happy, paying a fair price for the property, and not having a whole lot of headaches after you move in.
Makes sense. Awesome. So, the next question, I'm pretty sure relates a lot with not necessarily the people that are moving to Boston from a different state, but also locally. Because, nowadays, it's so much information online. And for people that are, let's say it's the first time when they either purchase or sell their home, how to find a good realtor when they get to that situation. If, let's assume they don't know anybody that, have used a realtor before.
Sure. So, if you don't know a real estate agent, if you don't know someone who does, or maybe you do, but their realtor was terrible and you don't want to work with them, or maybe they were just from another state or country and you can't work with them, If you're starting from scratch, which is like not the ideal position to be in, my first recommendation is always, try and find that personal connection through friends of friends, through family. And if it's just not there, a good place to begin is online. Just like you want to start looking at real estate online, getting an idea of how much house for how much money. You can do the same thing for realtors. You can look at their profiles. You can first, narrow down the town or the market you want to live in. If you're looking at a particular town or an area, then you can look at you can take a look at what real estate firms are in that market that you want to land in. And then you can actually start researching the real estate agents. There's tens of thousands of realtors in the state. You're not going to have a hard time finding them. What will be difficult is figuring out who's going to be the best for me. And some things to consider. If you're looking at super highly producing agents, they do a good job, but typically they're more difficult to get a hold of because they have so many people tugging at them from so many different directions. Someone who's going to sell 40, 50, 60, 70, 100 houses a year is not going to be as easy to reach as someone who sells 20 or 30, which is still really good numbers. So you want to think, what's the availability that I want for my realtor? Like if you're an out of state relocation, you're moving in, you don't know the area, you might need a little bit more attention than someone who's pretty comfortable in the market as it is, and doesn't need really a lot more information. But if you need more information, if you need more attention, you want to be sensitive to what's the workload of the real estate agent that you're looking at now. Will they be able to service your sale, provide you enough information that you really need, and give you the time to help educate you on the market? Because they are out there. On the other end of the spectrum, you don't want to find an inexperienced or a brand new real estate agent or an agent who just doesn't know the market that you're going into. So if you're there's a lot of corporations bringing people in. If you are an executive or high-level management and you're being brought into the marketplace here for a transfer or a new job, and you can buy a $1 million, $2 million, $3 million house, and that's what you're looking at, you don't want to work with someone who has no idea what they're doing, who's never worked with a relocation, and who doesn't know the marketplace, because it's just going to be a disaster for you. Because you're spending a lot of money, you need someone who really you can rely on. And then the same thing at a smaller level. If you're only spending a couple $100,000, that's fine. You don't want to work with someone who has no idea what you're getting yourself into or what they're going to get you into. You want to work with someone who can help not just show you property and get a sale or get a lease. You want to work with someone who understands the marketplace, the town, and the community. If you've got kids, school is going to be really important to you, and then other community events, activities. Like where's the nearest horse riding lesson, like equestrian estate? Where's the nearest fencing academy? Where's the nearest chess club? Those things are going to be important to you, and you want to talk to someone who's going to have those answers, not someone who's going to be like, oh, I don't know, Google it.
Yeah, it makes sense. And so if you would be to put, I don't know, like two numbers, like just number one and then number two places to search for realtors, if we take away the option of having somebody as a referral,
mm-hmm.
for somebody that's brand new, if you would say, okay, number one, go here, number two, go here.
Sure. So first place to look is online. I recommend a third-party site. If you go to a real estate site and look at their agents, you'll see their profiles and their bios. You'll see reviews, but those sites are privately owned by that company, so they're only going to post really good reviews, right? Like if I've sold 20 houses this year and so far this year, and everyone had a bad experience, I can just post positive reviews from 2 years ago or 3 years ago on my site. You want to look at like a third-party reviewing site like Yelp. Yelp is a great place to go. People can review the brokerage as a company or individual agents. There's also there's a ton of resources for that as well, that just do reviews and testimonials and things like that. It's a great place to start. The next place to start is actually business networking clubs, right? Like there's the Business Networking International, BNI group, has a ton of chapters across Massachusetts. If you are moving into, Middlesex County, or you're moving into into Boston, or into a city or wherever, you can look up a BNI chapter there, call them and say, hey, do you have any good realtors? Because usually there's one or two. You actually have to get interviewed to join one of these groups, and you have to provide references, so you can't just be any random idiot. Usually that can be a great source for business. And there's other business networking groups as well that you can reach out to. There's the Realtors Associations. You can call for referrals. And if you're speaking to agents directly, you could ask the agent, if I don't want to work with you, or if I can't work with you for some reason, do you have someone in mind who I should work with? Say you call 10 agents in a city, and they all recommend the same one or two people. Immediately that'll narrow it down for you. And usually people will be forthcoming with this information. If they're not, maybe you're not talking to the right person. So those are some great resources for actually finding someone if you don't have a personal connection or a personal referral.
Makes sense. Awesome. So we got another question coming from Will Coriano. Will, to post your question here. And the house in Mass, what credentials a person needs to begin with before anything?
So the things that you need when you're getting ready to buy a house are, first, a pre-approval. You want to call a loan officer at your bank or at a mortgage company. You want to call a mortgage broker if you know one, and try and get a pre-approval, because they're going to run you through the financials and the numbers and see what you can afford. They'll check your credit, they'll check your income, all that stuff. If you don't know a mortgage broker or a loan officer, like I said, you can call up your bank. If you have a huge bank, like a national or international bank, it might be a little more difficult to reach someone, in which case I would recommend find a personal referral. If you know someone who just bought a house or who's getting ready to buy a house, ask them who is their loan officer. Did they do a good job? What's their phone number? Whatever. If you can't do that, another great place to start is looking online. Look at mortgage companies, look at loans, do a little bit of research. Don't go too far down that rabbit hole, because it's kind of like, if you're trying to see what loans you can get and what your numbers are in the mortgage, go through all these mortgage calculators. It's almost like self-diagnosis on WebMD. Like, there's good information there, but there might be a disconnection between like your exact circumstances and what loan products you could use. So it's best to just get in touch with the loan officer, do a pre-approval. And when you have that, when you know what you can afford, what kind of loan you need, that's when you're going to look out and find a realtor, which we just kind of talked about. And then, the realtor will get you, out looking at properties and get the ball rolling.
Awesome. First of all, Will, thanks a lot for taking the time to post your question in the comments. And let us know if Tom's answer makes sense, or if you need any other details in there. And if not, just stay with us until the end, and just to find out if you won the $25 gift card from Amazon. But also, if you have any other questions for us, feel free to put them in the comments below, and we'll be happy to get to them. So also, before I get into the next question, we also have Sergio asking, do you mind letting me know how to plan for renting a place in Mass if I'm coming from York to study?
Sure. So we touched on this a little bit earlier in the talk. If you're coming here for school, what you want to do is identify the location you're going to be in. Are you studying at MIT? Are you studying at UMass or whatever? So, or WPI, wherever you're going, like, look at the city that you're going to be going into. And then you can start looking at apartments online. But if you're like, I don't know where to go or where to start, you can call the school and, you like, right away you'll get assigned an advisor. So you can contact your advisor and say, hey, I don't know the area. I've never been there, or maybe I have, I just not familiar with it. Do you know who I should talk to about finding a place to live? And oftentimes they'll be able to help you. If not, they should refer you to another department in the school that handles like housing, and like because the people that handle housing, like for the dorms, also might have connections with landlords off campus or in the area. Because something that happens a lot is as the university becomes established and starts bringing in more interstate and international students, property owners immediately around campus will put their homes up for rent, because they know they can charge a good rate. They can rent it out by the room, by the apartment, whatever. And then they have unlimited amount of tenants through the students that are around there. So there's usually a lot of options on campus, immediately off campus, or in, very, very close by, like walking distance. So that would be a great place to start. And if it's just kind of overwhelming, I would just call the advisor or call the someone at your school that can help you find housing, or at least point you in the right direction to get started.
Awesome. Also, should you let us know if that makes sense to you. If you need more details about that, we'll be happy to get to the question more. And if you have any other questions about renting a place or owning a place in Mass, feel free to put them in the comments below. And don't forget to stay with us until the end to see if you get the $25 gift card from Amazon. Cool. All right, so we are getting close to wrapping things up. So I got my last question in here, and I don't know if we covered that in the past, but the main thing is where to apply to get a pre-approval, in my home state or in Mass, if the person is planning to own a place in Mass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. We talked about pre-approvals briefly, but what if you've got an awesome bank where you live? You live in Utah or Oregon or something, and you're like, I'm moving to Mass, but I'd like to get a mortgage here if I can. The customer service is so great, or whatever. Call up your bank and ask them, if I apply for a mortgage, will you close on a purchase out of state, specifically in Massachusetts? They're probably going to say yes, but it's going to depend on the bank. Like if it's an interstate or if it's a national bank or an international bank, I'm going to say definitely they'll say yes, because they have probably a few branches in Massachusetts anyways. There are some mortgage companies that, they're all in one state, but they land all over the place. It's going to depend on the bank. So if you really want to work with your bank, call them up first. If you don't care either way, it might be better to find a loan officer or a mortgage broker, find a small local bank that you can work with. They tend to be easier because there's less of a bureaucracy to kind of claw through if you have any questions or if you have any issues. So you can look at the town, look at your destination. It's not hard to get online, research the banks in the area. If you're having trouble actually finding them, banks are always on Google Maps and like those other like GPS services. So you could, I don't know, if you're moving to Melrose, like just go on Google Maps, Melrose Banks, Massachusetts, and then like all the banks in town will just pop up on the map, and then you can click on them and get their phone numbers and call them. So that can be a really great resource for you to get the process started. However, something to keep in mind, the pre-approval does a credit check, and it does impact your credit score. if you get pre-approved in your hometown bank, and then you get pre-approved at a mortgage broker in the Midwest, and then you get pre-approved with a bank in Massachusetts or something, and then you're just calling these people left and right, they will be happy to take your social and your name and everything and run a report. But over time, it will hurt your credit score. So, today I'm pre-approved for 650,000. Tomorrow I'm pre-approved for 625. The next day I'm pre-approved for 610. And like, hey, wait a minute, where is this money going? It's because your credit is actually coming down. And it's not exactly like if you call 3 banks, you don't lose $30,000 on your loan. But you got to keep that in mind. You want to do the research on the front end and do as few pre-approvals as possible. Because if you can have one bank that can see if you're eligible for FHA and jumbo and whatever products, the ARMs, see if they could just do it all at once. See what loan product I can get instead of calling a ton of different banks, because you don't want to have to wait another 30 or 60 days for that to come off of your credit report or for your credit score to come back up.
Totally makes sense. Awesome. So we also got, before we announce the winner for today, we actually we do have, let's see, yeah, we do have a couple more minutes here, so we can answer another question coming from Christina. No, Christina, thanks a lot, first of all, for taking the time to ask the question. And the question is, what's considered a good credit for a first-time home buyer, and one difference someone with, say, 800 credit score and a 620 credit score?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Christina. That's actually a really good question. So your credit score primarily impacts your cost of money, which is like your rate. So if you have like the top credit rating, you're going to get the best rates, and they're going to be able to push the amount of your loan a little bit harder, and they'll be able to approve you for more loan products. If your credit score is at the bottom of the spectrum, you're not going to get as good of a rate, and you're not going to be able to get all of the loan products that are out there. So can you buy a house with, a 620? Yes. Can you buy a house with an 800? Absolutely. In the long run, the biggest difference is how much you're going to pay for how much money you're going to get. The lower your credit score, the more money you will pay and the less money you will get. The higher is as vice versa. So, it's definitely not, it's not a deal breaker. It's not going to kill you if your credit score is a little bit low. In fact, if you call up the loan officer, you get your pre-approval, you can ask them, if my credit score was a little bit higher, what else could we do? Would it be better? Would I need a higher or lower down payment? Would I get a lower rate? And you can work it out with the loan officer, because they get paid commission on loans and they want you to get a loan. So if you want to buy a house, they want to give you a loan. But the numbers have to be right, and they'll work with you on what it needs or what you would need to make it ideal.
Awesome. So Christina, let us know if that makes sense. Again, thanks a lot for taking the time to post the question here. And if you need any more information about that, feel free to keep posting the questions in the comments. And meanwhile, we have already chosen the winner for today, and the $25 gift card will go to Will Coriano. The main reason was, Christina, I know you won last week, and I think Will's is for the first time when he actually posted a question here in the comments. And we'll direct message you for the address, if you don't mind, right after the broadcast in a couple moments here, and then we'll get to send you the gift card in the next couple of days. Anyway, I don't know, Tom, if you want to add anything else before we wrap things up in here.
No, I think we got a lot of good information on the international reloads and talking about the mortgages. So if you have interstate, sorry. So if you have more mortgage related questions, you can please post them here, and we can bring them up next week or answer them in the comments below. But If you have more mortgage-related questions, it would be a great idea to actually call a loan officer. And if you don't know someone, I'd be happy to refer you. I know some great loan officers all throughout the state. So, it's best to get the information straight from the professional who works in that space full time.
I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you, but the connection got a little broken up here.
All right. First of all, for here today on this live Q&A, I think I have a little bit of a technical email. If everybody can with the final thought. Anyway, direct message will for again, thanks a lot everyone for joining us today. Please comment below, and we'll be happy to get to them in the next episode. All right, thanks a lot for watching. You guys are great. You have a great.
Can you hear me?